My wife's funeral was on a Tuesday. By Friday, her sister was already in our bedroom going through Shirley's jewelry box. I want to be clear about the timeline because it matters. 4 days. Shirley and I had been married for 38 years. We built everything together, the house in Dayton, the savings, the life we made from scratch with nothing handed to us. And 4 days after we buried her, Nadine Pratt was standing in our bedroom with a canvas tote bag, picking up Shirley's things and setting them aside in a little pile on the dresser. My name is Gary Holloway. I'm 62 years old, retired plant foreman out of a manufacturing facility in Dayton, Ohio, and up until about 7 months ago, I thought Nadine was just difficult. Turns out she was something else entirely. Shirley got her diagnosis in the spring of 2022. By fall, the doctors were using words like timeline and quality of life, and Shirley handled it the way she handled everything. Quietly, practically, without making a production of it. She kept going to her job at the library 3 days a week until she physically couldn't anymore. She made lists. She had conversations with people she trusted, one by one, in her own time, on her own terms. She did not, as far as I knew then, have a conversation with her sister Nadine about jewelry. Nadine is 67, Shirley's older sister by 3 years. They grew up together in Canton, and I had known Nadine for nearly 40 years, long enough to understand her patterns. She was the kind of person who always knew what things were worth. Not people, things. She could tell you the resale value of a piece of furniture, the going rate for vintage silverware, what a particular necklace might fetch at a good consignment shop. I used to think it was just a habit, one of those harmless quirks a person carries from childhood. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. The week after the funeral, Nadine came by every single day. I told myself she was being supportive. She brought food, which I appreciated more than I let on. She helped sort through paperwork, which also helped. She was good at paperwork, organized and methodical in the way people are when they have been paying close attention to things that don't belong to them. Her husband Leonard came twice that first week. He's 67, a retired accountant, a quiet man who mostly does what Nadine tells him to do. He sat at my kitchen table both times, drank coffee, said very little. I noticed he was looking around the room when he thought I wasn't watching. On Friday afternoon, I came in from the garage and found Nadine in our bedroom. She had Shirley's jewelry box open on the dresser. She was holding a gold chain with a small pendant that had belonged to Shirley's mother, turning it over in her fingers the way you examine something you're thinking of buying. There was a canvas tote bag on the bed. I could see a bracelet in it, and a pair of earrings Shirley had worn to our nephew's wedding 4 years back. I stood in the doorway. Nadine didn't hear me come in. Nadine! She turned around. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked like someone who had been interrupted while doing something entirely reasonable. Gary, I was just going through a few things. Shirley told me she wanted me to have some of her pieces. We talked about it toward the end. She was very clear about it. I didn't say anything for a moment. I looked at the bag on the bed. We'll figure all that out later, I said. Leave the bag here for now. She hesitated. Then she set the necklace down and said, of course. And we went to the kitchen and she made coffee. And we talked about nothing for an hour. When she left, the tote bag was gone. I noticed it that evening when I went back upstairs. The bag was gone and so were the items that had been in it. I called Miles. He's 29, works as a paralegal in Columbus, and he is the son of Shirley's brother Earl, who passed 8 years ago. After Earl died, Shirley stepped in the way she stepped into everything that needed doing without being asked. She packed Miles's lunches when his mother was working double shifts. She drove him to track practice. She showed up to his college graduation even when she was already tired in ways none of us fully understood yet. Miles loved Shirley in the quiet, steady way you love someone who showed up for you when they didn't have to. He answered on the second ring. I told him what I'd found. He went quiet in the way he does when he's thinking something through all the way to the end. Then he said, "How long are you going to wait before you do something?" I said, "Long enough to know the full picture." Over the next 2 weeks, I paid attention. Miles started coming by more often, which nobody thought twice about. He was grieving, same as me, and it was natural for him to be around. But Miles has a quality I had always appreciated in him. He could be in a room without anyone really registering that he was there. He watched. He listened. He kept notes on his phone, dates and times, what Nadine brought with her when she came, what she left with when she went. It added up faster than I expected. The jewelry was one thing, but Nadine had more on her list than jewelry. About 10 days after the funeral, she came by on a Wednesday morning and walked through the living room slowly, the way a person walks through a space they are already mentally rearranging. She stopped at the dining table, a solid oak piece Shirley and I had bought at an estate sale in 2003 and refinished ourselves over a long weekend. Nadine ran her hand along the edge of it. "Shirley always said this table should stay in the family," she said. She mentioned it to me more than once. I said I was glad to hear that, since it was staying in the family right here. Nadine smiled like I had said something mildly amusing and moved on to the pair of framed prints in the hallway. Shirley had bought them at an art fair in Yellow Springs maybe 15 years ago. She loved those prints. Nadine tilted her head and looked at them the way you look at something you have already decided you want. These would look good in our front room, she said. I told her they looked good, right where they were. She let it go. She always let things go in the moment. That was the pattern. She would mention something, gauge my reaction, and move on. She was keeping a running list somewhere in her head, and she was patient about it. I understood that now. 3 days after that, Leonard called me. He was careful on the phone, measured the way accountants are when they are delivering information they want to seem casual about. He asked how I was holding up. He asked about the house, whether I had thought about my long-term situation, whether I had spoken with a financial advisor. He mentioned that the house was a lot of space for one person. He mentioned that the market in Dayton was strong right now, that spring would be a good window. Then he asked, almost as an aside, whether Shirley had kept any savings accounts he might not know about. He said Nadine had mentioned that Shirley sometimes handled money separately, on her own. He said it wasn't a big deal, just that if there were assets outside the estate that hadn't been accounted for, it would be better to get ahead of it. I said I wasn't sure what he meant by that. He said he was just trying to help me think things through. I thanked him for the call and hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a long time without moving. That same afternoon, Miles called me. He had been at the house earlier in the day while I was at the hardware store. He said Nadine had stopped by unannounced. He said she had gone upstairs, and when she came back down, she had a small cardboard box with her. He had asked her what was in it. She told him it was just some personal items of Shirley's she was holding onto for safekeeping. Miles had taken a photo of the box before she left. I looked at the photo. I recognized the box. It was from the shelf in our closet. Shirley kept letters in it, cards from the kids she had taught over the years, a few photographs. Nothing valuable in the way Nadine understood value, but it was Shirley's. And Nadine had walked into my house and taken it. I sat with all of that for the rest of the day. The jewelry, the dining table, the prints. Leonard asking about separate savings accounts, the box from the closet shelf. Then I called Loretta Finch. Loretta has been my estate attorney for over 15 years. She is not a warm woman, but she is the most thorough person I have ever worked with, and she does not waste a single word. I laid out everything, the jewelry taken from the bedroom, Nadine's claims about what Shirley had promised her, Leonard's phone call about hidden accounts, the box Miles had photographed. Loretta listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Gary, before we talk about Nadine, I need to tell you what Shirley and I put together 14 months ago. I didn't say anything. Shirley came to me in the spring of last year, Loretta said. She was very specific about what she wanted. I assume she had walked you through the details. She had and she hadn't. Shirley had mentioned once that she had been handling some things with Loretta. She had said it the way she mentioned a lot of things she did quietly and competently while I was focused elsewhere. I took care of something. She had said, for later, I had not asked enough questions. I had thought later meant something vague, something down the road. I did not understand that she meant specifically this. Loretta told me about the property first. Shirley had purchased a piece of land in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in the fall of 2020. 3 acres on a lake outside a small town called Newberry, with a 2-bedroom cabin, a wood stove, and a covered porch facing the water. She had bought it outright for $178,000 using money from an inheritance she had received when her father passed, combined with savings she had set aside over several years in an account I had not known the full details of. She had registered the property solely in her own name. In her estate, it passed solely to me. Nadine was not mentioned in connection with the property. Nadine was not mentioned anywhere in the updated estate documents. The life insurance policy, $95,000, a policy we had set up early in our marriage and kept current for decades, had been updated 14 months ago. Primary beneficiary was me. Secondary was Miles. Nadine's name did not appear. I sat very still while Loretta talked. Your wife knew something, Loretta said. She may not have known the exact scale of it, but she planned accordingly. Everything is documented and airtight. I thanked her and told her I would call back in a day or two. Then I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the house, and I thought about Shirley going to Loretta's office on her own, sitting across from that desk, laying out exactly what she wanted and why, and not saying a word to me about the specifics because she didn't want me to worry about it. She had just handled it, the way she handled everything. I sat with that for a long time. I still sit with it sometimes. 2 days later, Nadine called me. She opened the way she always opened things, by asking how I was doing, whether I was eating, whether I was sleeping. I told her I was fine. She said she was glad to hear it. Then she said she had spoken with an attorney. She said she was not trying to cause trouble. She said that more than once. She just wanted to make sure Shirley's wishes were honored, and she felt that some of what Shirley had wanted for her had not been properly accounted for in the estate documents. She mentioned the jewelry. She mentioned the dining table and the prints. She mentioned carefully that Shirley had spoken to her about a savings account that Shirley managed separately, and that Shirley had indicated some of that money was meant for her. She said her attorney had advised her that verbal promises could carry legal weight in certain circumstances, and that she was prepared to pursue the matter formally if it came to that. I let her talk. I did not interrupt. I did not tell her that I was sitting at my kitchen table with my phone set to record, which is legal in Ohio for a conversation you are part of. I did not tell her that Miles was in the next room. I just let her say everything she wanted to say. When she finished, I said, "I hear you, Nadine. I'll be in touch." She seemed satisfied with that. She said she appreciated my understanding. She said she knew this was a hard time and she didn't want to add to my stress. Then she said goodbye and hung up. I called Loretta that afternoon and told her about the conversation. I emailed her the recording. She listened to it that same evening and called me back. "This is helpful," she said. Her claim about the savings account directly contradicts the estate documents Shirley signed. And the statement about the jewelry is an admission that she took items she believed she was owed, which is not how that works legally regardless of any alleged promise. She said she would have a response prepared for Nadine's attorney within the week. I said there was one more thing. I told her about the box Miles had photographed. The one Nadine had walked out of my house with the one with Shirley's letters and photographs. Loretta was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll add that to the letter." I said, "Make sure you mention that I have documentation of when it was taken and by whom." She said she would. The letter Loretta sent to Nadine's attorney was 4 pages. I read it twice. It was the most thorough piece of writing I have encountered outside of a technical manual, and I spent 30 years reading technical manuals. It addressed every claim Nadine had made, the jewelry, the furniture, the prints, the alleged savings account, with specific reference to estate documents, beneficiary designations, and the property registration in Michigan. It noted that personal property had been removed from the residence on 2 separate occasions without authorization, and that this removal had been documented by a witness and photographic evidence. It referenced the recorded phone call. It stated clearly that any further contact regarding these matters should go through Loretta's office. The letter requested the return of all removed items within 10 business days. It noted that failure to comply would result in a formal police report for theft of personal property with full documentation provided to law enforcement. Nadine's attorney did not respond with a counterclaim. A shoebox appeared on my front porch 8 days later, no knock, no note. I brought it inside and opened it at the kitchen table. The bracelet was there, the earrings, the gold chain with the pendant that had belonged to Shirley's mother. 3 other pieces Miles had logged in his notes. Every item accounted for, the cardboard box with Shirley's letters and photographs was on the porch beside it. I sat at the table for a while with both boxes in front of me. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel angry. I felt something quieter than either of those things. I felt like a man who had been handed back what was already his and who understood now that the person who had really protected him was not in the room. Leonard did not call again. Nadine did not call again. I did not call either of them. I had nothing left to say to Nadine, and I knew that anything I said would only give her an opening to reframe what had happened into something more comfortable for her. Some people need the last word badly enough that they will rewrite the entire story to get it. I was not going to participate in that. What I did instead was call Loretta and tell her to proceed with the sale of the house on my timeline, with an agent of my choosing. She handled everything from that point forward. I did not have to deal with a single showing, a single negotiation, a single conversation I didn't want to have. The house sold that April. The numbers were what they were after 38 years of payments on a paid-off home in a decent suburb. Solid. More than I had expected when we first bought it, though Shirley would have said she expected exactly that all along. I transferred $45,000 to Miles from the proceeds. He called me that evening, startled in the way you are startled by something that shouldn't surprise you but does anyway. I told him it was what Shirley would have wanted. I told him it was what I wanted. He was quiet for a moment. Then he thanked me in a way that told me he was doing his best not to cry, which is exactly the kind of thing his father Earl would have done too. I told him to drive safe and hung up. I did not contact Nadine about the sale. I did not inform her of the proceeds or what I had done with them. As far as I was concerned, that chapter was closed and locked, and I had the only key. I started packing the following week. I did not pack everything at once. I was methodical about it, the same way I approached any job worth doing right. The things that mattered most went first: Shirley's photographs, her books, the cardboard box with her letters, which I was not going to let out of my sight again. The 3 small watercolor paintings she had done in the last couple of years of her life when she had taken up lessons and gotten genuinely good at it without making a fuss about it. Those went into the truck wrapped in moving blankets. Then my tools, my files, the practical things a man accumulates over 38 years of maintaining a house and a life. I made arrangements with a small moving company Miles recommended out of Columbus. Reliable and discreet, he said. They were both. Over 2 weekends in late April, while the house was under contract and the paperwork was moving through Loretta's office, I moved the better part of my life 6 hours north. I drove up alone the first time to open the cabin. It was a Thursday morning in late April, still cold enough that my breath showed in the air when I stepped out of the truck. The property looked different from the listing photos Loretta had shown me, bigger somehow. The pines along the back of the lot were taller than I expected, and the lake was visible through them, gray and flat in the early morning light. I unlocked the front door and went inside. The cabin smelled like cedar and cold air, and something faintly familiar that I could not immediately identify. It was clean. Shirley had been here probably more than once, and she had left it the way she left everything, in good order. I walked through each room slowly. The wood stove in the main room, the 2 bedrooms, small and practical, the covered porch facing the lake. I stood on that porch for a few minutes with my hands in my jacket pockets, looking out at the water and the tree line on the far shore. Then I went back to the kitchen to look for the coffee maker, and that is when I found the note. It was folded once and tucked into the frame of the kitchen window. The same small notepad paper she kept by the phone at home, her handwriting in blue ink. I stood at the kitchen counter and read it. I will not write here what it said. Those words belong to me. What I will tell you is that I stood at that counter for a long time after reading it, and then I went out to the porch and sat down in one of the 2 chairs Shirley had already put out there, and I looked at the lake, and I understood for the first time since November that I was going to be all right. Not fine, not the way people mean when they say fine to end a conversation, but genuinely, solidly, all right, the kind of all right that has some weight to it. Miles drove up the first weekend of June. He arrived Saturday afternoon in his old Civic with a bag of groceries and no announcement, which is exactly his way. We walked the property together in the late afternoon, through the white pines at the back of the lot, down to the shoreline where the water was still cold enough to ache. He asked how I was doing. I said better, getting better. He nodded, and we walked for a while without talking. Miles has Shirley's quality of being comfortable in silence, which I had always valued in her and which I found unexpectedly moving in him. She picked a good one, he said, looking out at the water. I agreed. We went back and I made dinner, and we sat by the wood stove and talked about Earl, which we had not done properly in years, and about Shirley, and about what I was thinking of doing with the property going forward. There is a woman down the road who runs a kayak rental and guided hiking operation for tourists, and she had already mentioned that the extra acreage might be useful to her in the summer season. There were conversations to be had, there were things to build or maintain, or simply be present for. I have 3 of Shirley's watercolor paintings hung in the hallway now. I walk past them every morning on the way to the kitchen. The light off this lake in the early morning has a quality I have not found anywhere else, something to do with the angle of it through the pines and the way it sits on the water. Shirley would have painted it if she'd had more time. I think about that most mornings, and it does not make me sad the way it used to. It makes me feel like I'm living somewhere she chose for me on purpose, which I am. There is a county meeting next month about a proposed access road that would cut through wetland further up the peninsula. The woman with the kayak operation asked if I would come and speak. She said someone with a construction background would be useful, someone who understands both what gets built and what gets lost in the building. I told her I would be there. Some people spend a long time waiting for someone else to hand them the life they want. I understand that now better than I did before. What Shirley left me was not just land and a cabin and a policy that paid out clean. What she left me was a decision she had already made on my behalf. The decision that I was worth protecting, that what we had built together was worth preserving, that I deserved a place to land when everything else came apart. That kind of thing does not come from a document. It comes from 38 years of paying attention to who a person actually is. If you are the man in your family who built things quietly while everyone else made plans, if you have been the one who showed up and did the work and did not ask for recognition, hear this. The people who were paying attention know what you did, and if you have not yet taken the steps to protect what you built, today is the right day to start. Not for yourself alone, for the people who will still be here after you're gone, sitting on a porch somewhere, reading a note you left in a kitchen window, understanding for the first time that you saw them clearly all along.